Have you ever started a big project? You know what can happen to big projects. Sometimes, well, we just lose the energy. Sometimes we lose the spark. Sometimes we lose our mojo. If we had a plan to keep us going, now I'm not talking about fast sewing. I'm talking about sewing that just keeps rolling along. So we can turn an idea to something we can use, something that's finished. No more UFOs, unfinished objects. Ugh. So we're going to talk about doing some time management, the features on the Baby Lock Altair, because we need to keep this on the road. I'm Cathy. This is Sewing Tech Talk, and it's time to sew. So now, let's chat about keeping these projects rolling along. I'm going to talk today about doing some foundation piecing. I'm going to do a little wedding ring, little miniature double wedding ring quilt. And I'm going to do some foundation piecing. Now, one thing about foundation piecing, what you're doing is you're sewing on a piece of paper, and it can be a little fiddly. What do I mean? Well, it just takes a little bit of time because there's a number of steps involved. And doing my little quilt, even though it's small, there's a ton of pieces. So I thought this would be a good project to explore how we could set up our machine, set up ourselves, set up our sewing environment so we can just keep rolling along. Because not everybody has, well, let's just say that not everybody has all day to sew. We have to kind of divvy our time out between the time that we have to sew. And, well, if you set everything up ahead of time, maybe this project will keep rolling along. So let me talk about some of the things that I do to kind of keep a project going, the things I have to set up. First, let me talk a little bit about the sewing environment. I'm lucky I have a dedicated sewing room. Well, it's kind of my job. I have to have a place set up so that I can show you these videos. But you may not have that luxury, or you may have a smaller area where that you can sew. So depending on the area that you have, it's kind of helpful if you can have everything set up and ready to go whenever you're ready to go. So for example, I do have a dedicated sewing area. I can lay my stuff out. It's not generally disturbed by anyone except me, but maybe you have to sew in the guest room. Maybe you have to take your machine and put it up on the dining room table. If you have the option, you can get a dedicated sewing table like a cabinet. One thing about a cabinet that's really nice is you can keep your machine in there, all your parts and pieces. It can be put away when you're not using it, but it also can pop up and be ready to go when you're ready to go. You also can get a number of sewing totes or just things to really hold the parts and pieces you're going to need when you're doing your individual sewing sessions. Now, I'm talking about sewing sessions that might be 15, 20 minutes long. It's nice to be able to carve that little bit of time out of our day, and most people can. Think about when you could carve time out of your day. Maybe you could put dinner in the crock pot and that would ease up time that day. Maybe you can't sew during the week. Maybe you can only sew on the weekend. Figure out a time when you might be able to get some sewing put in. Now, what I also do is I take my project and I kind of chunk my project up into little parts and pieces. I call them like, let's see, I have a handout and I call them time groups. What do I mean by that? Well, for doing this little project, this foundation piecing project, I'm sewing a number of the arcs that are going to go into the project. This is my first real time group. What I did, in foundation piecing, you need the papers. I printed all those. I cut them out using paper scissors. I pre-cut a bunch of my little pieces to go on there. I sorted them by the colors that I'm going to use. So I did all that prep work. And now when I sit down to sew, I'm not fiddling with all that. It's all ready to go. So that's one thing that you can do. Take your project and chunk it up into time groups. And like I said, I made a handout. I even gave you a little pattern if you want to make a miniature double wedding ring like I am. But time groups depend on your project. Maybe it's a garment that you're making. Think of all the different areas that you can do it in little chunks. let's channel Nancy Zeman for a little while. You know Nancy Zeman, sewing goddess. She had what was called 10, 20, 30 minutes to sew. Anyway, she broke that sewing time down into small bite-sized pieces. And we can do that too. And by setting up the machine, we can also make that time, the 10, 20, or 30 minutes that we have, really, really productive. So let me talk to you about how I set up the Baby Lock Altair to make the features of this machine really rock out when I'm doing my paper piecing. So first of all, the one thing I suggest is figure out how you're going to be piecing your quilt, your garment, your whatever, and let's create something that's going to be maybe a repetitive motion that's really easy for us to repeat. Why do I say repetitive motion? Well, if you have to stop and think, that can take some time away from being productive when you sew. So let me share how I put together the machine and my little arcs to make me really effective when I do have 15 minutes to sew. So paper piecing, it's a little unusual. First of all, you have these papers, and there's tons of patterns out there that use paper piecing, and there's even a ton of videos because there's several ways to do it. But basically, what you have is a piece of paper, and then your fabric is going to go on the back. You're going to sew on the paper side because what it gives you a sewing line. Like I said, there's a little bit of placing, trimming, fiddling, but you end up with a perfectly pieced, precise patch that's going to fit into your quilt. And that does save time in the long run, because if you put it together and it doesn't fit together, well, that's generally also when things go in the UFO bin. So we want them to be fitting together so we don't get frustrated. So in paper piecing, what I did is I took all the different pieces and I cut out small pieces that would fit basically where they need to go. They don't have to be super accurate, just a little bit bigger than the piece that I need. Notice some pieces are a little bit larger than others. That's okay. So I cut those out and I put them in order. Now, how does paper piecing work? What paper piecing does is you take your pieces, and I'm going to put the raw edges together. I'm going to put them on the back side of my paper. This paper actually has a place for that raw edge. Yours may or may not. I'm going to sew along that line and then open up my pieces and then trim. You'll see that when we get to doing it. But that's basically the process. Now, let's set up the machine for all the features that can really help us be productive in our little time capsule that we're going to stitch on. So first of all, the machine has a lot of features, and yours may or may not. But this machine has needle up and down. It has automatic scissors. It has automatic pressure sensing technology, which means if I sew on something thick or thin, it's automatically going to adjust. It has automatic reinforcement. It also has a start-stop button. That can be great when you're doing free motion stitching and you don't want to have to use your presser foot. So those are the basic features of the machine. But let's go to the screen and the settings and let me show you some other options. So here's the screen of the machine, and I have it set up for my straight stitch in the middle. Couple of the features that I really like for this process is I have pivot. When I touch that button, what does that do when I'm sewing? That means after I finish stitching and I take my foot off the power pedal, that means that the needle stays down, but the foot raises up, and I can easily turn the project if I need to. I love that feature. The other feature I have is an LED guide light. So on the front of the machine, it shows me a guide light, and that shows me wherever I want to place it. It could be right where I'm stitching. I'm going to use that when I set up the machine for this. Or it could be the edge of an applique. It could be my seam guide. There's lots of uses for that LED guide light. But let's dig a little bit deeper. Let's go into the settings, some of the more advanced features of this machine. So when I go up into the settings, I can see that I have a whole bunch of different adjustments, but I'm going to go to the multifunction foot controller. Now that's an option for this machine. An multifunction foot controller is your standard foot control, but a little sidecar on the side. And you can program this side to do any of 4 functions, and you can also program the heel of the foot control to do another function as well. So I can have the heel do presser foot up and down. I can have it do absolutely nothing, cut the thread, do the needle up or down, take a single stitch, or sew in reverse. Actually, on this one, I like it to do the presser foot up or down. Now my little sidecar, I like that to be my thread cutting. Now you can put this little sidecar on either side. You set it up for what works best for you. So that's the one feature that I'm going to use on this. Let's see if there's more. Now, this is really cool. The automatic presser foot lift. What does that mean? When I have these turned on, what happens is if my presser foot is in the up position, when I press on the foot control, it's automatically going to lower down. That also means that if I want the foot to come up, I can either use the heel of my foot control, or the foot's automatically going to come up when I take my foot off of the power pedal. So I can put all these together in a great way to keep me really, really effective when I do my paper piecing. So let's see how that works. Okay, now I have my LED guide light on. I have my pieces. Let me put my pieces up so that you can see. So in paper piecing, I'm going to put one behind, and I'm going to put the second piece behind as well. And I'm going to line them both up with that raw edge on the back. Now, I'm going to sew on that solid line. Now, when I'm sewing on that solid line, I want to be able to be super quick and effective. So I'm going to raise my presser foot. I'm going to place my item right below. Now, this is how I use that LED guide light. I want you to notice that when I have everything placed down here, I have the foot up, and I really have no idea where that foot would come down, but the guide light's going to show me where that stitching line is going to be. So remember, I set the foot to automatically go down when I press my foot control, and it's going to stitch right on that line. Now, another thing that I do is I could set up these individual stitches on the machine to cut them up just exactly where I want. Right now, this stitch is set for 2.5 stitch length. I kind of like something a little bit shorter when I'm paper piecing. So what I can do is I can set up the machine and put that setting into the memory of the machine. Now, whenever I turn on my machine, it's automatically going to go to that stitch length. And I don't have to remember to do it, fuss around with it. Remember, I'm ready to go. So now, let's stitch this. Now that wasn't a very long seam, but this quilt could be very large. These could be very large paper piecing projects. This could be a king-size quilt and not the miniature that I'm making. When I'm done, what I do is I could either press the button up here, but I want my feet to work just as hard as my hands. So all I do is I press that little sidecar on my foot control and it trims my thread. And because I selected that advanced feature, the foot comes up. Now when I'm ready to sew, it's going to go back down again. Pretty neat, right? Now one thing that's kind of important is when I turn this back, and remember there's lots of different ways to do paper piecing. I want to trim this back, so I'm going to trim this. Another thing is you want to set up your sewing environment so that everything is super easy. I have a trash can right down here at my feet. So when I trim this edge, all I do is trim it directly into the trash can. And I'm ready to go with my next piece. How do I know what my next piece is? Well, it's literally laid out and all I do is grab it. Put the raw edges together. I hope you can see that the 9 little pieces on this little arc, I can really rock and roll, and I can go pretty quickly. I set everything up so when I have my little time, my time happens to be in the morning, yours could be some other time, that I can come and I can do probably about 4, maybe 5 or 6 of these arcs in 10 or 15 minutes. And that really takes the stress out of getting all these multiple arcs done. Now, another thing I want to chat about is I've set up these arcs and they're going to be put together with another little piece in the middle. Sometimes when you set up your project, it's important to get the one part done, but you may not know the next part. To me, actually getting all these parts and pieces, the arcs put together, means that I can audition them on my next part, which is my background fabric. Why do I think that's a good idea? Well, sometimes so that we don't have a UFO, I think it's kind of important to get jazzed up again, to get excited about a quilt again. And, you know, it takes a while to get through some stuff, and maybe you just need that little spark to get through. Let me show you what I'm talking about. I'm going to put these aside and bring up some potential backgrounds. Now, I don't know which one I'm going to use. I originally thought I'd like the gray. Let's see what that looks like. Here's my different parts and pieces. Now, I think that looks okay, and it's kind of exciting, but let's see what it looks like on a different background. Maybe black. Ooh, that's kind of cool too. Do you see how I'm going through this different process? And I might have been kind of tired of sewing arcs by this time, but now I'm kind of excited about the possibility of this next phase of my quilt. So taking it in chunks kind of keeps me excited, kind of keeps me motivated. I want to show you the fabric though, that I didn't think I was going to use as the background, but it's really got me excited about this quilt. Are you ready? It's a little unusual. Look at this. Now, I would have never thought this was a background, but let me show you. Look how fun that is. I can fussy cut these, and I think it's really going to add a touch of movement to my quilt. Oh my gosh, I really need to get through with all my arcs. I think I only have a couple days left of 15 to 20 minute sessions, and then I'm really excited about getting to this part. So I got jazzed in the middle, and maybe that's what you need too to finish your UFOs. Check out what your machine can do for you. How can you put together a plan to keep going? Put together a plan to keep sewing exciting, and most of all, keep yourself productive. And then give yourself a little bonus. Maybe you just need to take a look at it. Take out some of those UFOs that maybe you haven't finished. See if your machine can help you get over that hump. Just sew on them for 5 minutes. I'll bet you get excited again. And put together a plan, because if it's in the box, it's not really a great quilt or garment or whatever it is yet. So the Baby Lock Altair has tons of cool features. Has all kinds of built-in features. The multifunction foot control, well, it's an option, but I think it's pretty great. Set up your sewing environment so that you can get in there and just sew. Because what we really need to finish all those UFOs is time to sew. I'm Cathy. Thank you so much for watching today. I'm going to send it off to George. He's going to tell you a little bit more about the Altair and get those UFOs out. I think you will enjoy finishing them up.
Thanks, Cathy. As usual, that was an incredible presentation. The Baby Lock Altair is dollar for dollar the most advanced machine in the industry. It has a large 9.5 by 14-inch embroidery area, plus 494 built-in beautiful designs, 30 of the most amazing fonts that you can arc and array and edit, plus many large, beautiful monograms. You have the ability to create a design without a computer. With the IQ Designer, you can take an image from a phone, send it to a machine, and it turns into beautiful embroidery instantly. You also have an automatic applique creator to create great borders around names and other embroidery designs. Plus, of course, we love our never miss needle threader, and it also cuts all the jump stitches that you want. Now, it's not just for embroidery. This is an incredible machine with 11.25-inch opening. It also has a automatic fabric sensor. This fabric sensor senses heavy fabric like denim and sews automatically. From there, it will also sew on lighter fabric like tricot. It will sew elastic. It's incredible. Now, for the real difficult fabric and for quilting, it has a digital dual feed with a belt system that controls all fabrics perfectly. It also has a laser guide, so you can guide for that perfect seam allowance. It's incredible. As I mentioned, this is dollar for dollar the most advanced machine in the industry. We have a special package right now. The total package value is $14,999, but we have it on sale for $8,999. We're offering free shipping across the country, as well as we have interest-free payments of under $188 a month. But that's not all. We have a special bonus for a limited time, and while supplies last, we're including 63 spools of beautiful embroidery thread, 2 separate design collections by Anita Good Design, which has over 600 design files in all different styles. We're including stabilizer, all kinds of needles, bobbins, and a membership to Love of Knowledge. We're here, you're going to see all kinds of demonstrations and techniques on the Baby Lock Altair and other sewing techniques. This is for a limited time, but I also mentioned we have interest-free payments. Now, for those who don't want to finance, we have even a better bonus. So give us a call at 1-800-865-9664 or click on the link to order today. Bye for now.